We're going to learn about data hiding in Java. When creating classes, we want to make sure our classes create objects that are reliable, efficient, and most importantly, classes that can hide their properties and functions to the outer world, so to keep data integrity at all costs. Java does this by limiting access between classes through access modifiers. Java has 4 access levels or access modifiers. The first one is public. So if you put public in front of any instance variable or a function, that means that you want Java to make sure that everyone can access these instance variables that you added the public in front of them. If you instead use private, that means only this class can access these instance variables. No one else can. If it's protected, that means with all classes within the same package or derived classes, which we'll talk later about derived classes, can then access these instance variables. If it's default, what that means is that if any other modifiers are missing, Java uses this one, which is default, which also means it's accessible within a package. Now let's go ahead and take a closer look in code so we can have an idea what are we talking about. Alright, so let's go ahead and open up our Eclipse and create a new project. So right click, new Java project. We're gonna call this Java hiding. Go next, go finish. Go ahead and create our package, com.javaprograms.java hiding. Finish, and inside of that we're going to create our main entry class. So class, again, make sure that your public static void main is checked, and we're going to call it Java data hiding. Go finish. Excellent. So we will leave it that alone. Let's go ahead and create our new class. We're going to go class. We're going to call this cup again, as we've done before. We can have the public static void selected here because it's just a class that we're going to be using. So, okay, now here we have our cup class. Just for example, we're going to use the same one. Now we're talking about different ways in which we can use to either hide our data or instance variables so that they're visible within our class, or they're actually visible within other classes that we instantiate. The first one we talk about is the public. So in order to create a public instance variable, very simple. What you do, just say public, and of course you start with the type of the instance variable. In this case, let's say a string. And we're going to call it cup name, just for simplicity here. Okay, that's what you do. This means if I save this and I go to my main entrance here and I create an object, an instance object of this cup here. So if I go say cup and I name my cup is equal to new cup. Now if I use this reference here, my cup dot, you can see I can access directly the cup name, and I can say it's equal to my cup, right? So it's very possible to do so, because as we have defined here, this is just a public instance variable. Now if I were to create another one and say, well, I want this to be private, and I call it string, let's change it to int, of type int, my height for instance. Notice if I save and I go back to my main class here where we have our main entry point function here, if I were to say here at the bottom, if I were to say my cup dot, you notice there's no way to be found this instance variable here, my height. right? I cannot access that from this class here. So the only thing I can see is just cup name and other things that come with Java, but not pertaining to our cup class here. The reason why, again, is because we made it private. We hid it. We want to make sure that no one else can access this myHeight instance variable. Now, if we just said, for instance, string my other name, right, with no private or public here, no way of accessing it, and we save this and we go to our main class and try to access that, you will see my other name is there. You can access that and you can give it something, my other name. Now the other one you talked about is the protected. Let's call this int my protected. And go save this. You will notice again, if I go my cup, again I'm referencing this object that I've just created here, my cup, and I go dot, and you can see protected for 12. So as you can see, my protected is 12. I'm able to access that because we said here it's protected modifier here. Okay. Now you may ask yourself, well, why do I need to know this? Why do I need to know these different ways of hiding or exposing your data, your class data, to other classes or hiding it? Well, it's very important because as you can see, if you are building an application and you create classes, because an application, as we've talked about, it's just a lot of different classes that interact with each other. You want to make sure that this interaction is safe and very concise, because sometimes you don't want to get to the point where a class A or class B that you create is able to just go straight and change states here, these instance variables. A good example would be, let's say you created actually this class here called cup, and this cup has a height that you set to be 34. And if you were to make this, say, public, this would mean that any other class, a good example would be from anywhere, even from here, I could just say my cup dot height is equal to 0. Now, you may say, well, yeah, I want something to be equal to 0, but do you really want something to be equal to 0? Is there a cup with height of 0? As you can see there's a problem, because then if you have this class that interacts with, let's say, 20 or 30 other classes that depend on having my cup to always have a fixed height of 34, and all of a sudden there's a class that actually takes that height and changes to 0, you can see how many problems that can cause. So that's why we are learning about ways, or Java gives us ways to hide data or to make sure that this accessing data between classes is minimized. And it's always very important to, whenever you're creating instance variables for your classes, never use this public. You can, again, as you can see, you can use it, but it's recommended that you don't use it, the public, because again, anybody can access it. Any class can go and access and change. The best way to protect your data, every time you're creating a class and you have your instance variables, use private. So every time, use private, because this will guarantee that only this class here that we're creating here, you can create a function, a method here that can access this myHeight and do whatever needs to be done and then return the value that we may need, instead, as opposed to having an extra class that is using this cup class or object to change this myHeight, because that can create a lot of problems. Alright, thank you. Now you understand why we use all these different ways of accessing or not accessing, or as they call access modifiers in Java, and how important they are. And you will have a lot of opportunity to see all of these in real programs, in real applications, so that you understand. Alright, so I'll see you in the next video.